Hey everybody, if you're like me and you are a college football fiend, you can't get enough of it, then you're going to like this episode. I've been watching a lot of prediction videos and a lot of the YouTube channels and things like that, and reading about the teams and studying up. And you can see my headline 122 days until FAU. That's right, 122 days away. Can't get here soon enough. So excited for that. So excited to see what the new look Terps look like next year. Spring ball is over now. And so I figured it was a good time to do my way too early Larry projections for 2025. I'm going to do that for Maryland, for the Big Ten, and for the college football playoff. We're going to get through all of that, and so I will start. I'll get started. Here we go. The way too early 2025 Larry projections for Maryland, Big Ten, and the college football playoff. We will start by taking a look at Maryland's schedule. Here it is, the 2025 schedule. Week 1, Florida Atlantic. Week 2, Northern Illinois. Week 3, Towson. Got to go 3-0 in those games, right? Week 4, Wisconsin. Then you get a bye week. Week 6, Washington, Nebraska, UCLA, another bye week. In the last 5 weeks, Indiana, Rutgers, Illinois, Michigan, and Michigan State. And I'm going to go through each one of those games, starting with Florida Atlantic on August 30th. Last season, Florida Atlantic went 3-9. The recruiting rank is 85th. They had the 87th best transfer portal class. They lost 31 players, many of them to Power Four schools. Of course, none of this really matters. Maryland is going to win the game. I've got them a 95% chance to win the game, even though it will likely be with a true freshman in his first college game. I think Maryland handles the game very easily. Not much more to say about that with the Owls from Florida Atlantic. Game 2, Northern Illinois gets a little trickier. Northern Illinois, who went 8-5 last year, the 84th best recruiting class, the 124th best incoming class for the portal. They lost 24 players, many to Power Four schools. Again, Maryland should dominate this team, but they did beat Notre Dame last year, despite the 8-5 record. How weird is that? I still have Maryland at 80%. They probably could be a little higher than that, but 80% for Northern Illinois. Game 3 against Towson, Mike Loxley's alma mater. They went 7-5 last year. Who cares? 141st in recruiting and 143rd in the portal. Who cares about any of that? Maryland should beat these guys by 50 points. Loxley won't do that, though, right? It's his alma mater, so he'll put the brakes on. We'll see what the score is, but I got him at 98%. Nothing's 100%. 98% in game 3. Game 4, things start to get interesting. Maryland goes to Camp Randall to face the Badgers of Wisconsin on September 20th. Wisconsin's an interesting team. They were 5-7 last year. The recruiting was 27th, so a couple spots behind Maryland. Transfer portal was 14th, though. They really good incoming class. They lost 30 players. Many of them went to elite teams. So is it a wash? Probably their incoming class is better than their outcoming class. But I think you got some problems there with Luke Fickell. I don't know. It seems like he's not a good fit for Wisconsin. He comes from that kind of more spread type offense, and Wisconsin has their history of being bully ball, ground and pound. And maybe it's just not a cultural fit. Maybe it's like a Mark Turgeon at Maryland kind of thing. Or maybe you look back at someone like Rich Rodriguez when he went to Michigan, how it just didn't work. It didn't fit. And I think that's maybe what's going on at Wisconsin here. And I think by the end of this season, Luke Fickell may be out of a job. We'll see. Of course, it will be Maryland against their former quarterback, Billy Edwards Jr. Maryland hopefully is making an upgrade, but it will be good to see Billy again, this time hopefully in a loss for him. Since it's at Wisconsin, I've got Maryland only at a 33% chance to win that game. They have a bye week, and then they host Washington. This is an interesting game. I think Washington is actually going to be a lot better this year than they were last year. They went 6-7, and they've got a lot of really good players. Their quarterback is Damon Williams, and he is highly thought of. And so I think there's a chance for them to do pretty well this year. They have a really tough schedule. And actually, this is a tricky spot for them because they're traveling across coast to coast. We saw what happened with teams that went coast to coast last year. It wasn't good. Maryland beat USC, for example. And Maryland's coming off a bye week before that. So you have these new coordinators. You got Pep Hamilton, you got Ted Monachino, and hopefully they're going to be able to take advantage of that bye week and face off against a team who I think is better than Maryland, more experienced, more mature than Maryland. Maryland's a young team. I still got Maryland as only a 40% chance here. I do think Washington is a better team, but because of all those factors, I think it's more than a marginal chance that Maryland can pull off that game, 40%. Next game, Nebraska. This is another interesting one because of Matt Rule and Dylan Raiola. They went 6-6 last year, won their bowl game to get to 7-6. The 22nd best recruiting class, 12th incoming class for the portal. They lost 36 players, not many big names though. They kept most of their big names. They really improved themselves through the portal this year. And you get Dylan Raiola in his second year. You got Matt Rule in his third year. I think Nebraska is going to take a jump up this year, and I'll talk about that later, what I think their record is going to be, but I think they're going to be a lot better, and I think Maryland is going to have a tougher time beating them. Even though Maryland beat them last year at Nebraska, and now Maryland will be hosting Nebraska this year, I still only got Maryland at about a 40% chance to win that game. Game 7, UCLA. And this has obviously drastically changed within the past couple of weeks because of the Nico Iamaleava saga, leaving Tennessee, going to UCLA. They've just become a much tougher opponent because Nico is a very highly rated quarterback. He came out of, he was a 5-star, and he won't have the same kind of weapons that he had at UCLA, that he had at Tennessee. He won't have the same kind of weapons at UCLA, but he still is very good, and he makes them a much tougher out. And what I just said about Washington having to travel across country to Maryland, Maryland's got to travel cross country to UCLA. And I would normally make this about a 50-50 game, if not for the travel and the Nico Iamaleava situation. I might make it a 40%, 45% for Maryland. Nico makes them a little better. But the cross country thing, I've only got Maryland at 25% in that game. Next game, game number 8, Indiana. This is another one where there are some factors set up in Maryland's favor that could help them win. We all know what Indiana did last year. They went 11-1 and then lost a playoff game to fall to 11-2, but made the playoff. Indiana. The recruiting, still not great, 46. Their transfer portal was good. Again, the 21st ranked incoming class. They lost 27 players, but only one player of note. I think they improved themselves. They bring back a lot of the talent. They have a new quarterback named Fernando Mendoza, a transfer from Cal. He's very highly thought of. And a lot of people think he's actually even better than Rourke. So we'll see. Are they going to be better? It's hard to imagine that they're going to go 11-1 again. And I'll talk about what their record's going to be. Seems like they kind of caught lightning in a bottle. Who knows? Of course, this is also the return of Roman Hemby, Maryland's 4-year running back. And stat-wise, one of the top, I think, 5 to 10 running backs in Maryland history. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when he comes back with a new team. Indiana, I do think, is going to be better than Maryland this year. But Maryland will be coming off another bye for this game. And Indiana will have to travel to Maryland, play at Maryland when Maryland's on a bye. Hopefully the coordinators can get Maryland ready. And if Indiana's doing well, and they do look like they maybe have a shot at a playoff again or contending in the Big Ten, the week after Indiana plays Maryland, they play Penn State, and that's going to be a huge game for them. So you could even throw on a bit of a trap game in there for them. The bye week, the trap game, going to Maryland. We'll see. Even all of that, I still got Maryland only at 40%. because Indiana, I think, is a better, more experienced team still at this point. Game number 9 at Rutgers. I think Rutgers might take a step back this year. They went 6-6 last year, 7-6 with their bowl game. Recruiting, they were 33rd in the country, which is okay for them. 50th best incoming portal class. They lost 21 players, no one of note. They didn't have a lot of players to lose of note. They did lose Kyle Monungai. He was their best player last year. It's hard to say. They have Ethan Kellick-Manis at quarterback. I don't think they're going to be great. I think they might take a step back. But Maryland's playing at Rutgers, and Maryland is young. So we'll see. I got that at about a 50% game. And the Loxley versus Schiano debate will continue. Hopefully, Loxley gets this one after losing last year. Game 10 at Illinois. I think Illinois is going to be really good this year, and I'll talk more about that later. They went 9-3 last year, and then 10-3 after beating South Carolina in the bowl game. And I think Bielemel's got them rolling. Bielema with the ground and pound, and they did lose their starting running back to Georgia in the portal, McCray. But I think with Bielema, he's always able to churn out a running game, and I think he's going to be able to do that. And with Maryland looking like the defensive line is an issue, this is the exact kind of game that's going to be really tough for Maryland to win. I think Illinois is good, and I think it's a matchup problem, and therefore I have Maryland only at about 20% chance to win this game. Game 11, Michigan. And boy, it's going to be interesting to watch Michigan this year after going 8-5 last year, 7-5 in the regular season. But the way they finished, beating Ohio State and then beating Alabama in the bowl game, and yes, it's a bowl game, and there were opt-outs on both sides and all of that, but still, they did that. And they did that with the worst quarterback play, I want to say in Division One, but maybe at least in the FBS, certainly in the Power Four. They had multiple games where they didn't even complete 10 passes last year, single-digit pass completions. Well, they bring in the number 1 rated player in the entire country this year, Bryce Underwood. He is a 100 rated player on 24/7 Sports, the number 1 player in the class. Originally committed to LSU. Michigan threw $12 million at him over the course of 4 years, not $12 million in 1 year, but $3 million a year. And he's going there. And even if he's just average, with Michigan's ability to run the ball and, of course, their defense, they're going to be good. They're going to be good, and we'll talk more about them later. But that's going to be a tough game for Maryland to win. Again, a team that's good at ground and pound, and Maryland, just with the defensive line, is going to be tough. It will be interesting if it's Malik Washington versus Bryce Underwood, 2 true freshmen playing. It'll be interesting to see that. But I think Michigan is a heavy favorite, even with Maryland at home. I've only got it about 15% for Maryland. Game 12, the final game of the year, and this could be a game where Maryland and Michigan State are facing off for a bowl game because Michigan State has a tougher schedule as well. They have a lot of losable games on their schedule. They could be 5-6. Around that, they're going to be. Maryland could be 5-6. So it could be, let's see who gets to a bowl game here. Michigan State went 5-7 last year. The recruiting class, not good, 57th. Their transfer portal was 26th, which is solid. They lost 22 players, mostly solid. Some solid players, similar to what Maryland lost, 1 elite player. I've got, since it's at Michigan, I've got Maryland about 40% in that game. And what does that all add up to? It adds up to 5.76 wins. It's a little higher than I had in my head. I'd been thinking of Maryland at about somewhere between 4 and 6. I keep toggling back and forth. After the spring game, the vibes are really good. I feel like Malik Washington is going to be really good. I feel like the offensive line looked better than expected. And, of course, they have a good stable of running backs. The defense will be a problem. But I think I'm leaning closer to the 6 wins now than I am the 4. And here, analytically, I've got it at 5.7. 6 wins, if you round up, it gets to 6. So There you have it. Maryland 5.76 wins, somewhere around 6-6, 5-7 next year. I've got them, and hopefully they can get to that six, get to that sixth win, keep the players together, keep the vibes going, build on that, and add in another good recruiting class in 2026 where they're off to such a great start. So there you go. There's my Maryland projections. Now I'm going to go into the Big Ten, and this is what the schedule looks like. You guys can find this online. The Big Ten put this out, and these are all the schedules. And I went through this with each team, figuring out where the pitfalls might be and how many wins I think each team's going to get. And so I'm going to start with that. I'm going to have them in order. I'm going to start with last place to first place. So here you go. Here's the first team, Purdue. I have them tied for 16th at 1-8, 3-9 overall. They're playing at Notre Dame in the non-conference. They're not going to win that game. I think they're going to be an underdog in basically every one of their conference games. It's set maybe they have a home game against Rutgers, so it's set maybe for that game. I can't see much happening for Purdue next year. I'm not sure if there's much hope for them. 3-9 overall, 1-8 in the conference. Next, Northwestern tied for 16th as well. I've got them at 3-9 and 1-8 as well. They open at Tulane. I don't think they're going to win that game. Tulane is a team that some people think are a contender for that group of 5 playoff spot. So I don't think they're going to win that game. And then every other game that they play, the team's better. So they do host Purdue. So we'll see. Maybe that's the game they can win. I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith. And Northwestern always does seem to win more games than you expect them to win, but I just don't see it this year with them. Next, Rutgers also tied for 16th. I've got them at 4-8 and 1-8 because their non-conference is really weak. I don't see them losing any of their non-conference games. I think they'll win all of those. They've got 5 road games this year. One of them's Purdue, so they could win that game, just like what I just talked about. But the other 5 road games, they're going to be underdogs in those games. They've got 4 home games. Penn State and Oregon are 2 of them. Another one's Iowa, and another one's Maryland. So yeah, like I just said, I've got that as about a 50-50 game. Purdue and Maryland. Rutgers and Maryland. But it's hard to find where they're going to get their wins. And yeah, maybe they can pull Iowa and Maryland, and maybe they can beat Purdue on the road. They get to 3-6 in conference, and they're 6-6 and bowl eligible. But I've got them at 4-8. I got them taking a step back this year. Next, Wisconsin. I said Luke Fickell, I think he's in trouble, and I don't think he's going to make it through the year. I think Wisconsin is actually – they were 5-7 last year, and I think they're probably better this year, but their schedule is brutal. They play Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, and Oregon. That's 4 almost guaranteed losses. So now you've got 8 other games. And those other games they play at Indiana, at Minnesota. They've got Illinois, who I think is going to be very good, as you'll see in a second here. Those are all they're home against. They're at Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota. They're home against Iowa and Washington. 2 other losable games. I see 10 losable games for them. That's a really tough schedule. So I've got them at 4-8 and 2-7. Even though I think they might even be better than last year's team, the schedule's brutal. I don't see a lot of wins for them this year, and I see Luke Fickell being in trouble. Next, we've got Michigan State, 5-7 overall, 2-7. We've got an easy non-conference. I think they're going to win all 3 of those games. They've got 5 road games against USC, Nebraska, Indiana, Minnesota, and Iowa. Those are 5 tough games to win on the road, all of them, and that's gonna be difficult for them to find wins there. Even if they go 2-3, that'd be really good, I think, for them. But then they have home games against Michigan and Penn State, 2 more very likely losses. They have home games against UCLA and Maryland, and They'll probably could be a favorite against UCLA. We'll see how the Nico thing goes. And the home against Maryland will be the last game of the year. And as I said, that might be for a bowl game. They could be 5-6 at that time. And because I'm a homer, I got Maryland winning that game. So that's why I have Michigan State at 5-7 and 2-7 in the conference. And I've got Maryland here in 13th place in the Big Ten at 6-6 and 3-6 in the Big Ten. And I went through their schedule already, so you already know my thoughts on that. The non-conference is very easy. They win those three, and then they find a way to get those 3 wins, as we just talked about in their schedule. In 11th place, and I think there's a little bit of a gap here, even though UCLA and Maryland are both 6-6. I think UCLA is going to be a little better. I think Nico helps them progress. I got them at 6-6 and 4-5 in the conference. They have 2 tricky games in the non-conference to start. They play Utah, and they're at UNLV. So that's if they can go 1-1 there, and I do have them 1-1 there, but I have them 2-1 overall in the non-conference. They play Penn State and Ohio State, 2 very likely losses. They're at Indiana, at USC. They have a bunch of other 50-50 games, and I do think they're going to be improved. But I think just enough to get to 6-6, get to a bowl, be 4-5 in conference. Tied with them in 11th place, Washington. Another team that similar to Wisconsin, where I think they're going to be a lot better, but their schedule is really, really tough. It doesn't help. The non-conference is pretty easy. I think they're going to win. They play at Washington State, and I guess that's always tricky, right? Big brother, little brother, and especially now Washington State must hate them because of what's happened to Washington State and their fate after the Pac-12 dissolved. I still think they win it. But then they've got Oregon, Michigan, and Ohio State. They also play Illinois. They play at Wisconsin. They play at UCLA. And at UCLA is probably the easiest of those, but still on the road. And I do think UCLA is going to be better. That's 6 losable games, and 3 of them I don't think Ohio State, Michigan, and Oregon, I just don't think they're going to win. And of the other 3, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough with that schedule. So I got them at 7-5, 4-5 in the conference. Number 7, I've got USC, tied for 7th, I should say. USC at 7-5, 5-4. This one's going to be interesting with Jaden Mayava taking over at quarterback after Miller Moss left. And it's hard to say. Everybody keeps waiting for Lincoln Riley to make it happen there at USC. It hasn't happened yet. At some point, they're going to get tired of him and they're going to move on. I don't know if it's this year, but if they go 7-5, 5-4 in conference again, the seat's going to start getting really hot for them. They play at Notre Dame. I don't think they're going to win that game, so that's their non-conference loss I have there. They have Michigan and Oregon. I don't think they're going to win those games. They play at Illinois, at Nebraska. They host Iowa. There's a lot of really losable games there for them. So 5-4 and 7-5 against that schedule. I couldn't get them any higher than that. Also tied for 7th, we have Minnesota now. 8-4 overall, 5-4 in the conference. They have a really easy non-conference schedule. They're going to go 3-0 there. They also play the 5 worst teams, at least according to my rankings here. The 5 worst teams in my rankings here. They play them, and 4 of them at home. Northwestern being the one on the road, but they play Michigan State, Wisconsin, Rutgers, and Purdue at home. And I think that that's a great shot to get 5 wins, but the rest of their games are Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, and Nebraska. And you see, I don't have any of those teams listed yet here. So I think that's tougher for them, obviously, and that's why I got them at 5-4 in conference, 8-4 overall. Indiana. So here we go. A drop back for Indiana. I'm 8-4 overall, 5-4 in the conference. And normally you say, hey, that's great for Indiana. But after last year when they're 11-1 in the playoff, Not so great. Well, it still is very good. They have an easy non-conference schedule, but they play Oregon and Penn State both on the road. I think those are losses. It doesn't matter how good Kurt Signetti is. I think those two are losses. So now you've got 7 other games, and there's some tough games. They play Illinois, they play at Iowa. I talked about their tricky spot at Maryland. There's some other games they could lose. And if they don't have that sort of, you get a sort of lightning in a bottle, like there's a momentum that builds with teams like that. And I don't know if they'll be able to make that happen again this year. I do think 9-3 is possible with them and 6-3, but I've still got them at 8-4 and 5-4 in the conference. Nebraska also tied for seventh, 8-4 overall, 5-4 in the conference. They've got an easy non-conference schedule. They'll go 3-0. They are playing Cincinnati and Indianapolis, which is, I guess, an interesting game. But Cincinnati's fallen way off from when they were really good for those 2 back-to-back years and made the playoff when it was only 4 teams and made the playoff. But they've got Penn State and Michigan. So I think those are going to be 2 losses. They've got USC, they're at UCLA, at Minnesota, they've got Iowa. Those are all kind of 50-50 games of good teams playing against good teams. And if they're 50-50 in that, that's 2-2, that's 4 losses. That's how I get them to 5-4, 8-4 overall. Iowa. Iowa, they play Iowa State every year. And Iowa State is a team that's getting some love in the way too early top 25 polls. Iowa State is generally ranked higher than Iowa in those. So I think Iowa State is the favorite in that game, and it is at Iowa State. So I've got Iowa State winning that, and I've got that as a loss for Iowa. They have 6-3 in conference. They're playing Penn State and Oregon. Those are going to be 2 losses. They're at USC, at Nebraska, and they've got Indiana. And those are 3 potential losses. It could be a 1-2, so they could be 5-4 instead of 6-3. I've got them 2 out of 3 there, though. 6-3 in conference, 8-4 overall. Here we go. Tied for third now, Michigan at 7-2 and 9-3 overall. So yes, an improvement. I couldn't get them back to Jim Harbaugh playoff levels, but obviously better than last year. The 7-5 team up to 9-3. I have a non-conference loss for them at Oklahoma early in the season. I think they play them in week 2. And the reason I have that is because I think, one, Oklahoma is going to be much improved. They've got John Mateer, who transferred in from Washington State, who, if you ask people to rank the top 10 quarterbacks in the country, a lot of people are going to have him in that top 10. So I think they're going to have a quarterback advantage, at least early in the year. If Bryce Underwood starts for Michigan, which it seems like he's the leader to start, he's going to be young still and very inexperienced, and they're going to go into Oklahoma. I think that's a tough game for them. I think they lose that game. They've also got Ohio State. That's a tough game for them. And yes, they won that game last year, even though Ohio State was a lot better. I think Ohio State's finally going to pick them off this year. And I think that's going to be a loss for them. They also have losable games at Nebraska, at Michigan State, and at USC. At Michigan State, I have them way down in the rankings here, but it is Michigan and Michigan State, and it is at Michigan State. So that's a tough spot for them always. So I've got them 7-2 in conference, 9-3 overall. Not quite back to playoff level or Big Ten championship level, but a nice rebound for them after last year. Tied for third, Oregon at 7-2, 10-2 overall. They've got a really easy non-conference schedule. They do play Oklahoma State and Oregon State, but it's both at home. And Oklahoma State was awful last year, I think 3-9. I don't think any of them are going to pose problems for them. They do play Penn State in conference. They also play Indiana. They play at Washington. They play at Iowa. And I just feel like they They last year won all those close games. They won every game. They had a number of close games that they pulled out every one of them. It's hard to imagine that happening again. So I feel like there's a loss at Penn State, and I feel like there's another slip up along the way in one of those games that gets you to 7-2, 10-2 overall, which is still, if you're 10-2 in the Big Ten, you're likely in a playoff, and we'll see. I've got that coming up a little bit. Illinois. Now here's the surprise. Here's a big surprise. Illinois at 10-2 overall and 7-2 in the conference, tied for third. They have one semi-tough non-conference game at Duke. And Duke was good last year, and Duke has shown some stuff in the past few years. But I think Illinois is going to handle them. I think Illinois is going to beat them. They're going to go 3-0 in a non-conference. Illinois does play Ohio State. They play at Indiana, at Washington. They've got USC. The rest of the teams are lower ranked, all on the right side of this list here. And I think they're going to handle those teams. And I think 7-2, they've got that Ohio State game, which is going to be tough for them to win, and maybe one slip up the rest of the season. But I think 10-2 is very doable for them with that schedule. 10-2 in the Big Ten, and looking at probably a playoff spot if you do that. Ohio State 10-2, 8-1 in the conference. Ohio State, you see that non-conference loss there. They're hosting Texas in week 1. And if it were later in the year, maybe I would change my mind about it a little bit. But they lost basically their entire defense, except for Caleb Downs. They had 14 players taken in the NFL draft. And yes, I know they're replacing them with 4- and 5-star players, with great recruits, with great players from the portal. And Jeremiah Smith is still there, and Caleb Downs is still there, and everybody's raving about Julian Sayin and the quarterback competition there at Ohio State. I still just think they take a step back this year from last year. And yes, last year they went 10-2 also, but I think they were more like an 11.5 win team and really could have been 12-0. They really, losing to Michigan is inexplicable. And they were whiskers from beating Oregon, from being the 12-0 team. This year, I think they're 10-2, but I think they're more like an actual 10-2 team, 8-1 in the Big Ten championship game, and a playoff team. And who does that leave at number 1? Sorry, Maryland fans. Penn State tied for first with Ohio State. I've got them 11-1 overall, 8-1 in the conference, and I have them beating Ohio State in the championship game. Their non-conference schedule is, for a team of that caliber, it's kind of a joke. You understand Maryland and Rutgers and Northwestern, et cetera, playing really easy non-conference games because you're trying to rack up wins to make sure you get to a bowl game or do your best to get to a bowl game. With Penn State, with the talent level they have and the stature of that program, they really should be playing better teams than that. They have 2 tough games. They play Oregon. They're at Ohio State. I think they'll be heavy favorites in every other game. They're likely not really get challenged in those other games. Oregon and Ohio State, I got them at about 50-50 each, so that's why I have a loss in there. But I think Penn State is one of the top 3 to 4 teams in the country this year. I think they're likely the best team in the Big Ten this year. And they remind me a little bit of what Michigan and Ohio State did Michigan 2 years ago and Ohio State last year, where they had a lot of NFL talent that they're bringing back. They're giving NIL money and bringing them back, and, more power to them. And it seemed as though they had one weakness, but they just addressed it with Trevor Pena in the transfer portal, a really highly touted wide receiver. They're going to be tough. Drew Allar, the 2 running backs, the great defense. Now they've got a legit target at the wide receiver. I've got them number 1. I've got them beating Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. So there you go. That's the Big Ten projections. Now I'm going to go on to the college football playoff. This is the bracket. and we're following the same seeding procedures as last year. Number one, I've got Texas. No surprise. I'm not the only one. A lot of people are going to have Texas number one. Arch Manning comes in. A lot of people think I think most people believe he's going to be an improvement over Quinn Ewers, who was already very good, got them to back playoffs already. And now it looks like they're going to be even better. I've got them as the number one team. Number two, I've got Clemson. I don't think they're the second best team, or they're very close to it. They've got a lot of players coming back. They've got Cabe Klubnik, who's a very good quarterback. They have two tough games. They're home against LSU in week one, and I think they'll win that game. I think they're really good. At home, I think it's going to be tough for LSU to win in that environment. And Brian Kelly has his penchant for losing opening weeks anyway. If it was at LSU, I might change that and say LSU, but I think they're going to win that. They close against South Carolina, at South Carolina, and wow, what is that? What a game that's going to be this year. But I think they go undefeated. No one in the ACC is going to challenge them. They're going to win the ACC championship game. They'll be 13-0, and that's why they'll get a 2 seed, even though I wouldn't have them ranked really as the second best team. Number three, there's Penn State. Just got done talking about them and what they're bringing back. And I don't need to go into it too much more, but I think I think they're going to be that high and that good this year. They're going to be one of the top 4 seeds. Here's one of my surprises. The Big 12, I don't think the group of 5 is going to get one of the top 4 seeds this year like they did last year with Boise State. I think Texas Tech and about 4 other schools are on contention for that spot. But I took Texas Tech because they have the number 1 portal class in the country. They brought in everything. And I think the volatile Big 12, and it's just this big like grab bag of teams. I'm picking them. It could be, like I said, for like 4 other teams, but I'm picking them, Texas Tech, to be the number 4 seed. Not the 4th best team, but the number 4 seed. I don't think the Big 12 has any top 10 teams next year. We'll see. Georgia, who as the number 5 seed, who I actually would probably rank the number 2 team in the country, but the way the seeding works, they're number 5. Have great players everywhere, great recruits, great transfers, great everything. I do have them a notch below Texas because of Arch Manning versus Gunnar Stockton. Gunnar Stockton is taking over for Carson Beck. Carson Beck is off to Miami, and the Georgia fans are elated about that. We'll see. He is highly rated, highly touted. They're just great. They just have depth everywhere. So it's hard to argue against Georgia. If the seeding were different, I'd probably have them as the number 2 seed, but I have them as the 5 here. The number 6 seed, I've got Ohio State. Like I said, a notch below last year's team. Oddly enough, higher seeded here than last year's team because of what happened with Ohio State losing to Michigan last year, going 10-2. I think 10-2 this year, but I think a legit 10-2, and I think 10-3 because I've got Penn State beating them in the Big Ten championship game. But the committee has said and followed through on it that if you play in a championship game, you're not going to get penalized for that against other teams who didn't play in a championship game. Which brings me to number 7, South Carolina. And this is all about Lenore Sellers, who I think is going to be, well, I think he'll be in the running for the Heisman and has a great shot to be in New York as one of the finalists. He is good. And I think he'll be a top 5 pick after the year when the NFL draft. They went 9-3 last year. They finished strong, and they were arguing that they should be in the playoff. I don't know, but they have a lot of losable games, but what that means is that schedule is really going to help them with their seeding if they can get to 10-2. I think they close against Clemson. That's obviously going to be tough, and they have just 4 or 5 just huge SEC games. So they're going to have to go about 3-2 in those games, 4-2. But if they do that, the other games they're going to be heavy favorites, and I'm taking them to get to 10-2 and to be the number 7 seed. Number 8, LSU. We talked about them with Clemson. I got them going 10-2 as well, even with the loss to Clemson. They've got a similar thing where but their SEC schedule is a little easier than South Carolina's. They've got about 3 really tough games and a couple others that are a little less. So they've got to get through that with just 1 loss. I think they can do that. Garrett Nussmeier is a great quarterback. Another one of those quarterbacks who could be a Heisman finalist. So I have them as the number 8 seed, 10-2 overall. Number 9, Notre Dame. And how juicy is that game right there? LSU and Notre Dame. Man, with Brian Kelly versus Notre Dame, how great will that be to watch? Notre Dame opens with Miami and Texas A&M, both of whom are going to be ranked. And say they're 50-50 in those games. Say they get through that 1-1. The rest of the schedule, there's not a lot of resistance. So if they get through that 2-0, they could end up 12-0, in which case they're going to jump up to a 5 seed there. And then slide everybody else down 1. They can't be a top 4 seed, but they'll be a 5 seed. But say they do lose one of those 2, they split, and then they finish 11-1. I think there's a very good shot at that. I got them as the 9 seed here. Number 10, Oregon. You saw that in the Big Ten standings, 10-2. And if you're 10-2 in the Big Ten, I think you're in. And I think they got the talent and the schedule to do it. Dante Moore is getting a lot of pub. He's I think going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten. We'll see. But Oregon 10-2, the number 10 seed. I don't think they're going to be as good as next year, and I don't think they're going to win all those. They won every game that was close that they could have maybe lost, and those things even out over time. So I have them in 10-2, not quite as good as last year, but still a playoff team. And here's my surprise at the number 11 spot, Illinois. And there were a bunch of different teams I thought about here, but again, you go 10-2 in the Big Ten, I think you're in the playoff. It would take some abnormal things to happen, like multiple ACC teams going undefeated and things like that. Like if Miami and Clemson were both to be 11-1 or 12-0 and play each other in the ACC championship game and they both get in, something like that. I thought about a 5th SEC team, which I'm going to show you in a minute because I'm going to show you all the different teams that I considered as well. But 10-2 for Illinois in the Big Ten, sneaking into that 11th spot, the 11th, the final at-large spot anyway. And number 12, the 12th seed, I've got UNLV. And this, I was a coin flip for this one. I think a lot of people are going to have Boise State in that spot again this year. But I think UNLV is going to be really good. And I think the 2 of them are going to face off in the Mountain West championship game. And I think whoever wins that game is going to get this group of 5 spot in the playoff. And so why not UNLV? It could be Boise State 50-50, but I've got UNLV. And so there you go. There's the playoff bracket. And then I'll quickly just kind of go through. I think Texas is going to win that group of 3 up there to get to the Final Four. I think Georgia is going to win that group to get to the Final Four. So you have Texas and Georgia playing in one semifinal. I think Clemson gets through, and I think Penn State gets through. I'm going to take Penn State over Clemson. I'm going to take Texas over Georgia. And then I got a 50-50 game with Texas and Penn State. I'm going to take Texas over Penn State to win the national title. Here are the teams I considered. They're just sorted by conference alphabetically. So the SEC over there is 8 teams that I considered, and it would have been 9 if Nico hadn't left. Tennessee certainly would have been there. I probably would have had him in the playoff if Nico had stayed. I don't know if it's so hard to say what's going to happen with the quarterback spot. Essentially swapped quarterbacks with UCLA. Joey Aguilar, I think his name is, and I don't know. I think it's a downgrade for them. I guess they could still be here maybe as a playoff contender, but I just don't think somebody's got to lose games in the SEC. They can't all go 10-2. There's going to be 9-3 and 8-4 teams. And it feels like Tennessee without Nico is going to be one of those that lose them. Florida, same thing. Mississippi, same thing. Texas A&M, same thing. And Alabama, I was toggling back and forth between Alabama and Illinois for the playoff spot. It was really, really close. I really could have put Alabama in there and could have had 5 SEC teams. I think the SEC is going to be dominant this year. I think it's going to be a little bit like basketball. I really could have had 5. In the Big Ten, the other teams considered Indiana and Michigan. And I had Indiana to 8-4, which isn't really close to playoff. But they were 11-1 last year, and they retained a lot of players. They had a good transfer class. Fernando Mendoza comes in from Cal, who's a respected quarterback and who people think is going to be actually maybe even an improvement for them. So I do have them as a playoff contender, even though their record only had them at 8-4. And Michigan, even with average quarterback play, I had them at 9-3, that close to getting into the playoff. And obviously, one game flips, they're 10-2 and they're in. The ACC, the only other team I had that was even close was Miami, and I did have them close. They were another one I considered for that final spot. Carson Beck comes over from Georgia. I don't know. They went 9-3 last year, even with Cam Ward, and Carson Beck is not Cam Ward. So I don't know. I think a 9-3-ish again for them. I don't even think 10-2 in the ACC gets you in. I think you got to go 11-1. So I don't think they're going to get there. And here's those 5 Big 12 teams, and there could even really be more than that. Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State, Kansas State, and Texas Tech. All of them feels like almost interchangeable. BYU's making waves with what they're doing in the transfer portal. Of course, you've got Arizona State, who actually did make it last year, nearly beat Texas and should have beaten them, had them on the ropes. Sam Levitt's back at quarterback. They lose Scattaboo, but they'll still be probably near the top of the Big 12. It's hard to say. Hard to say with them. I picked Texas Tech just because of their transfer portal haul, and it was kind of fun to just pick a random team. And of the others over there, Notre Dame, which I did have in, and then Boise State and UNLV, which I talked about as a coin flip for the final spot. So there you go. That is my way too early 2025 predictions for Maryland, for the Big Ten, and for the college football playoff. I'm sure you guys got a lot of things to say, a lot of things you disagree with, things that I'm completely wrong about. Let me know if you have any of those, or maybe if you like my picks, or if you like some of my surprises or what have you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This is IMS Radio.